Hey everybody, BTO Pro here. Today we're going to get pretty deep on two really small things. And it's because they've taken me forever to figure out. And so it's amazing to me in building hacks that some of the most complex things that you would think are complex are actually really easy to do. And then some of the things that are so drop dead simple are impossible. And so I'm going to focus on two things just to express how complex these are when building a text editor. And these are things you could repurpose if you're going to go and build a WYSIWYG of any kind. So the first is kind of knowing what you're touching at any time. So if I hit edit, we go into edit mode. And I put the cursor here. It's easy to know in the DOM, hey, this item is active, and then to do different operations against it, like place a menu or find it in the DOM tree and go, oh, okay, insert this node and this node right before it, and then visually wrap them on the sides. Like, that's super easy to do. However, knowing that the cursor is between there and doing what just happened there by like placing this menu exactly pointing to where you just were and knowing what you've selected took forever. So let's look at why. So first of all, you need to know what event to bind to. And this took quite a while. So if we look at, we're not going to do key press. We'll look at this thing. It's a inline context menu is the name of this. And so the inline context menu, move it over, make it a little bit bigger here. Inline context menu is that thing driving that. And so when it gets attached to the DOM, I have an attached lifecycle hook. I added a global event listener for select start. Now, unfortunately, there's no select finished. There's just select start, and then there's also selection changed. Never ever bind to selection changed. It fires like thousands of times per minute for whatever reason. So select start is only going to fire when a selection has begun. Now that involves putting the cursor anywhere. Like if I were to tap and put the cursor here. So let's step through the logic of how the heck we're able to position that there, because it's absurd. I actually end up having a lot of comments on some of these things. Okay, so just to get that there. First, I make sure that there's a lock claiming, hey, nothing has said to lock selection. It's just a global thing that I can throttle if I needed to make sure that you couldn't select items at any other point in time. There are some scenarios in HAX where I don't want you to be allowed to monitor selection events. So first, I have to see, are you editing the page? Right? So that's the first thing we have to distinguish against, because otherwise, we're going to track and start doing a whole bunch of operations for all this little silly stuff. So first, are you editing? Yes, I'm editing. Okay. All right. So, and is there something active, right? So I've selected an item. I'm not just arbitrarily highlighting the page. Like if I deselect this and then do select all on the document, that menu shouldn't trigger. Okay, cool. So we got through that check. Is what I've selected an active node has a tag name that's similar to the last one. Is this a text element? And so I do a selection to make sure that you haven't, like selected this cool picture and I'm doing highlight operations in here. I don't want to trigger that because this is a complex element. It's not a paragraph tag or a heading tag. So basically, whether or not you're in a heading or a H1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or a paragraph. All right, keep moving. And that the manager's open. So this is another edge case. Like make sure that this overlay is not open. Okay, so if we pass all of those, I set immediately a timeout. And you'll see we have selection lock down here as true. And so I set a timeout of 250 milliseconds because this thing just fires constantly. Like this fires way less than the other one, the selection changed event, but I don't want to keep triggering what this is going to do. So every 250 milliseconds, I'm going to try to do something because there's a good chance that it can fail at times. So here's why. So what I do is I say, okay, take the inline context menu as it currently exists and close it. And so that ends up giving the effect of that, right? That just closed. If I click, you'll see it kind of appears and then migrates. and it goes away and migrates. And that's what has that happen. Just in case it was, somewhere else on the screen, or it's not, jarring, or if I just click, I want it to go away, right? I don't, even though it is technically like right here-ish, I don't want it to be clickable. I don't want it to, be influencing as I move around in here. Okay. Okay, so then I can do window.getSelection, and this says, hey, what is the user currently highlighting? So when I do this, that area, that is a window.selection. It's going to return a range here. And so there's two concepts you need to know about in the DOM to even work with this. There's selection objects and there's range objects. And so whenever you select something, you can generate a range object. So in this case, get range at 0. So at the start of whatever you just selected, you could have multiple selections. Multiple selections and multiple ranges is how ridiculous this gets. So assuming that the user has invoked it, you're just going to have, cool. Highlight, I've got one thing selected. Programmatically, you could select multiple areas all over the place, and so that's why I'm saying give me array position 0, basically. And then I'm going to clone the range. The reason I do that is so that I have a perfect mirror copy as an object of what is selected here, but it's not identical. If it's identical, you could have some issues with what is actually selected when you go to apply stuff to it later. So then I say, okay, well, it has a start and an end offset. Are they the same? So if there's no difference, that just means that the caret is positioned somewhere. That's how the menu goes away. Okay, so we get into this loop. We say get the selection, first close this. Oh, by the way, there's nothing. All right, just get rid of it. Okay. Next, we're going to do another try here. So we're going to take that range. So a range object is an arbitrary area of the page, basically. I don't know how else to describe it. So already you can see how this might be difficult. A DOM object, right? I can touch this object. I know what it is I've highlighted. I can work with that object very easily. But a range is just any piece of the page. It could be, I could do that. This is a range. It's not a DOM node. It's selecting, starting someplace and ending some arbitrary place between lots and lots of nodes. So set the start of our range to selection.focus node. And so this is going to say, okay, well, what are you in? Right? So it's going to know, oh, well, you're inside this larger paragraph tag. So that's the focal node. And then start this range at whatever the start offset is. So that would be like where the cursor right there, right? So that would be like the start offset effectively. Then we do this funness. So inject a tracking element directly in front of what it is that we've clicked on. So we have this range of the page. We've cloned it so it's like a pseudo reference to this area, but not exactly that reference. And then we inject an invisible tracking pixel here. And to illustrate that that's actually happening, highlight this paragraph and you'll see that when I double click there, we inject an inline tracker. And so this is how we can go from something not useful to something actually useful. Because a range can have a node inserted into it, I can insert this inline tracker. And then a fun thing can happen. When I have a DOM object, I can easily figure out where that DOM object is on the screen. Versus a range is some arbitrary thing. How the heck am I going to track what the heck's going on there? And so now inline context menu it has opened that gets changed. And we'll see, because we're on this object itself, that when open changes, we want to fire open changed. And so now you imagine we've put that in the DOM and we've said, hey, you're visualized. Okay, so what takes over from there? Then so what we do is we take that inline context menu and we position it from the left at the offset location of the inline tracking pixel minus the width divided by 3, just because there's, generally speaking with this, there's like 9 options. Some of them you can't see, but as far as visual spacing. And so because of that, I want to go a third of the way through because we're trying to position this little point arrow to point exactly at where the tracking pixel is. And so then we also do it with top, and we say, hey, left and top, you both point there. All right, so all that logic just to know you selected this. Now, what do I want to do from there? So I can bold text, I can italicize it, I can disable link or remove formatting or do some other cool things. But in HAX, I want to do something really cool, which is inline a gizmo. And so if I hit inline gizmo, I can then fire an event up from there, app picker, there we go. And so it says, hey, app picker present options, which this fires when, so you insert inline gizmo, this is effectively me clicking the button. So what happens from there? We have to get a selection again. So we get the window selection to see what it is that is currently selected. Why? Well, because I'm starting a selection, and all this that I'm actually selecting is technically different from the thing that I cloned. Because the thing that got cloned, you'll see it used right here. It was just HE, and it put the tracking pixel there. So what I need to do is clone that again to realize that, oh, actually this whole area is what they selected, because they may have been doing a drag selection outside of that 250 millisecond window. So now we've got the real range. We clone it again so that it's not tied to the actual thing that's selected on the page. That could be problematic. And then, this was a fun one, what we've selected technically has a tracking pixel in it. And we don't want to put the tracking pixel everywhere. So with ranges, there's a set start after function built in. And so you can say, okay, we'll set the start of that range after whatever thing I pass you. Well, so I know that the inline tracker is part of the current selection, part of what's currently been highlighted. And so if I select this and the tracker's here, this little function says, oh, okay, we'll start it after there. All right. Now we need to store a placeholder of what the heck we just clicked on. So we take the range in this case and we write it someplace global and say, okay, I'm not doing anything with this yet, but I need to store it. Also, we take that range, and you can do toString. And so we take that little part of a page. It may actually go over spans and bolds and divs and things. And we say, hey, turn it into just text. And then this gets into some HAX magic, if you will. We say, okay, well, guess what the gizmo is. In our case, gizmos are custom elements. And so I've said, okay, well, anything that claims it can be visualized inline should pop up right here. And so that's how we get presented these options for the how to present this inline gizmo, which is what it says right there. Okay, so now I'm going to do vocabulary. And so what happened there is this text with the new range to string got bubbled up and put here. All right, so now we've got that selected area. This is exactly the selection I made, and we've put it into this field by default, which is just a nice little shorthand. And so now I'm going to write some contents here. Wow, the W3C are smart people, but this is so much work to have accomplished that no wonder I couldn't find a tutorial anywhere about how to do this thing. All right, so I read some text, and what this is going to net me is that when I click this, it's basically going to do a modal, and that content's going to be there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit insert, and because we cloned that area, right? So we had this range, and we cloned what the original was, and then we had this range, which is effectively an arbitrary part of the page that we have highlighted. Then we set this in a global, and then we write that to this store, quote unquote. Now we can call a function, and this function in this case is going to get invoked when I click to the insert button. And this function is going to come through, and it's going to generate the DOM node to insert. And then we're going to have to do this. So we got to find that tracking pixel again. So we find the tracking pixel, and we say, in this case, hey, the thing that's going to be inserted is inline. Okay, so there's this other really useful function. I've never seen it before. Insert adjacent element. And so there's 4 options. There's before begin, after begin, before end, after end, I think is what they are. And basically it just means whether, so if the word polymer was the thing here, it would be, do you want to insert right there, right there or right there, right? So it's just outside the boundaries or just inside the boundaries kind of a thing. And so I can say, okay, before the beginning of, which means here, so I'm going to put it right in front, stuff this node, which I just built a node out of what you selected. Then we're going to say, okay, well, is there an active placeholder? If there's not an active placeholder, we just keep going. But if there is an active placeholder, rerun extract contents. And extract contents is another really useful DOM API here. And so extract contents basically takes a range and says, well, whatever you just selected, it basically like returns it, but it removes it from wherever it was. So you can use this, if you select like 4 divs and it's out of 8 divs and you say extract contents, you'll know what's in those 4 divs, but the original 8 are going to get truncated. You're going to lose those 4 from the middle of it. So when we run extract contents, this will effectively give us the text that was put in the page. So since that text was the selection and I kept that range there for he may look static right now, blah, blah, blah. But because of that, I had that range kept. We extract the contents, which removes it, and we insert adjacent to where the inline tracker is, which means that we inserted this element, which we just built, and then deleted the original, and then we closed the inline context menu. All of that so that you get the perception that, when I click Netflix and I say inline and I say math, that now when I insert, it correctly identifies the word Netflix, removes the original, and injects our custom element in its place. And to see that this accurately does it now, you can see there's my inline tracking element. I can deselect that, and we can see that that math tag got put exactly where it was supposed to, and that the LRN vocab tag got put exactly where it was supposed to. And so that now when I click this, I get my little pop-up. All of that, right, this just took 17 minutes to explain, and way longer to program, how to do that, right? Just to do, knowing what it is that's selected and applying a change exactly where it was. So the next one is very similar. And so it would be, hey, I'm writing some text. And so let's just use HAX and we'll write. So text, I want to teach you about a cool DOM API operation. And if you're writing, right, I'm going to take this, we'll copy and paste, and we got a whole bunch of text. Look, my little inline menu showed up. And so, I might be pasting, paste. So now I have a whole bunch of content. And then I would go, oh, you know what? I'm writing, though. And so if I'm on a heading like this, and I hit enter, I don't want to break a BR inserted. I want to actually generate a new paragraph so that I can keep typing, because that's the natural user flow. However, so that's easy. That's an easy event to capture. So let's look at that real quick. So in HAX store, I believe it is, in our store, in the attached lifecycle, there we go. We have a key listener. And so I say, whenever this thing's on the DOM, hey, add an event listener for a key press. Now, that's also kind of obnoxious if you think about it. I need to listen for literally every key that's ever pressed. Kind of annoying. So similar to before, I say, well, let's make sure we're in edit mode before we really do anything meaningful. Make sure there's an active node. And this is new to me since I've been working with key press events historically. You used to have to know like the key code. So like enter was like key 13 on the keyboard or something. Now it's normalized. You can use event.key and write the name. So when the user hits the enter key and we're in edit mode and something is selected, we bother to even check what's going on. You'll notice otherwise I don't do anything. So now we need to grab the tag name of what's been selected and look at it and go, well, is it one of these, right? Is it an HTML primitive, either a heading or a paragraph tag, where the user would expect this functionality? Okay, so we notice, oh, well, it is one of those. Let's prevent the default. So the default behavior for return in the browser on a content editable item would be to actually insert like a BR without people noticing. However, and we're going to cover the P case in a second, I can then say, okay, well, fire an event, HAX, insert content, which is just something we have scattered around so you can quickly insert these things called HAX elements, which convert to DOM nodes very easily. And so in that case, because I'm on a heading, when I hit enter, that event fires, and it just inserts into the DOM a paragraph, and it focuses on the paragraph. That's easy. What's a little harder is, let's say I'm in a paragraph, and I go, oh, you know what, I'm writing a whole bunch of content, and do that. So that's how I got to spend the whole day today, is how do you do that? Because if I'm at the end of a paragraph and I hit it, well, yeah, that's expected behavior. If I'm in the middle of a paragraph, the expected behavior is to take all the stuff to the left of the cursor and keep it above, and all the stuff to the right of the cursor and drop it into a new paragraph. But there's no logical way to do that in the DOM, right? There's no function that says split this from one thing into two at this exact position. So again, we get into cursor positioning logic that's all buried in this. So okay, how do we do that? So again, we work with the selection API, and so we say, okay, window.getSelection is in selection, and then we generate a cloned range object again, so that we have wherever the cursor, that's basically going to give us where the cursor is. And so if I highlight stuff, I think, and I haven't tried this, yeah, and I do that, it's going to be right after it. Yeah, see, it moved it over there, but so it needs some better support for when you highlight something and hit enter. It's also kind of a hard event to trap for, but so what we're looking for is that is right there, that one little position of the caret, and then we break stuff apart. So to do that, we get that range. So we've got the start set on whatever the focus item is and the start offset. So in this case, it's 0. It just positions it right there. Make sure we're at the start. Then we generate what is called a fragment. And these are new to me for sure, but you can use, similar to range, I can use the create range API. And so I can do document.createRange, which basically makes this fake area to work within. And then I can do .create contextual fragment. And that basically allows you to load just any generic HTML. Like I could put p tag and whatever I wanted in here. So it takes, kind of generic whatever you want, and it will load that. So then I'm going to take that fragment, and I'm going to insert that fragment into my range. And so similar to that tracking pixel, right? Like we kind of have to trick these non-DOM objects because it's a range. We have to kind of trick these non-DOM objects into being DOM objects. And so now we go, okay, well, so we inserted that little tracking thing. This isn't a real element, so I'm also abusing part of the custom element spec here to have something I can easily target. So put that in place. All right, now find what's active. So in my case, this is something called active node, and I'm actually going to make this a constant so I could clear some stuff up. So I want limit to always be a pointer to active, the DOM node, active node, even if active node changes. Then we have to figure out where that tracking pixel, so to speak, is. And so this is a little Polymer convention to resolve light and shadow DOM, but effectively it's the same as document.get element by ID, if you will. I do a query selector looking for a HAX split point, which is this. Okay, so that'll give me, I have the thing in question that I'm trying to split and the point at which I'm trying to split it. And then this is something I found on Stack Overflow that I refactored a bit, called split node, which basically is, okay, well, split at this point in this thing is kind of the way to read this. So let's look at how that works, because I wrote a lot of comments on how the heck this little thing works. Okay, so we're going to split that node. So what we want to do first is we're going to disable that active node. This is why I said I needed a constant for this limit, like what the thing is we're working within, because I'm going to disable the reference to it. So we're going to disable active node, which is effectively the same in HAX as going and doing this. So nothing is highlighted. That's important so that you don't get some classes and other things cloned across that we don't really need in this operation. So then we have a timeout that just waits very briefly to make sure that that went through. And then we do, okay, find the parent item of what we're splicing. So we go to the active node, which is this, even though it's not active anymore, it's the reference to it. And we go to its parent, which is encompassing the whole body. And then we get the index of where this is so that we know where it is amongst an array of elements. So let's say it's 6 because it's the 6th thing in order. Okay. I don't know why you need to do this node.owner document, but so it's effectively the same as document.createRange. This is just from the example, so I figured I'd stick with it. So we make a fake range, okay, called left range. So if you think we're working on the stuff that's to the left of the cursor. And so then we set the starting position within the in the parents, find whatever that thing is. Okay, so that is a nice little way of getting the, in this paragraph, if this is the one selected, it's going to give me the 0 position right there for this range. It was a nice little cheat that they had to do that. And then we're going to use set end before, which I think I pointed to before, although I might have said set end after previously, or set start after. So this is set end before. So similar logic, right? I've injected this fake node into this range, and then I'm going to use that to say, hey, range, you're going to stop right before that node shows up. So that's going to split everything to the left of this HAX split point element, which isn't a real element. Then, left range, I'm going to run that extract contents function that we mentioned before. And so this is going to generate a document fragment. And the document fragment is going to be everything from where that little pointer is all the way to the front. So this is the left section. Okay, so that when I hit enter, all right, we'll have extracted contents. And then I wrote a whole bunch of stuff here as to what the heck is happening with this, as to why this works. So then this is in Polymer, this is saying, hey, take the parent of whatever the thing is we're working on. Okay, so get the active item that's being worked against, which in this case is all these nodes. And then insert an item into it. And so the insert before is, okay, well, we're going to insert this item, which is left, all the stuff to the left. We're going to insert just before limit, which if you remember, limit was actually the thing that's active, basically. And so what that's effectively saying is, okay, take this stuff out of here. So it's going to more or less delete that stuff. And then it's going to take these, that stuff it deleted, and it's going to insert an element above the current one. So it gives the perception that a new element was created down, but actually this is the original element that's going to be pushed down because I'm going to hit enter here. And so this is the new element. This is not this is the new element. This is not the new element. This is the element with the front of it truncated. And so then we're going to remove our placeholder from the other item because it's sitting in there. And so after we remove our placeholder, now we can say, oh, well, now the active item is this again. It's this thing that was selected. All that, which is the same as it was previously, but when I create a document fragment out of this, I want to make sure there aren't all the classes currently applied to this when it's active. All that so that I can splice that correctly and get it into a new paragraph, quote unquote. And so when I pump that fragment in there, it'll have the starting P tag, and then the DOM will just kind of fix it automatically. So I go from that fragment into a full-on open-close paragraph tag. Same on the other thing. When I bump this down, it'll be like, well, I'm still a paragraph because you said I was. And so then you don't have to worry about that, the opening P tag being spliced off. So all of that stuff just to do those two content operations. It's pretty amazing in working with these DOM APIs because, if I highlight this and I hit bold, you would think, wow, that was really hard, right, to know what text to bold. No. That's actually one command that's recognized across browsers at this point. That's document.exec command. I guess everyone making the browsers and making text editor capabilities got a little pissed about having to do these, and so they just made these shorthands. And so it's pretty awesome shortcuts for these things, right? So like subscript, superscript, underline, remove formatting, strike through, those are all really easy. Even create link, although I need to clean it up the way I've implemented, but create link is also really easy. You just highlight this and then btopro.com. And then so the act of injecting a link to wrap that correctly is a single command. Otherwise, it would have been probably all the crazy stuff that I just showed of selecting the range and then making sure that it's positioned at the beginning. And yeah, so I hope this is helpful to someone. I've been meaning to do this as I kind of, figure out these different parts of HAX and making HAX go, because people expect that content experience. It's also the bulleted list thing. It's how we're able to have the bulleted list be generated and kept, but yet if you're in a paragraph, we know you're in a paragraph and we modify differently versus, if you're in a heading and you hit enter and you get a paragraph. So it's all those little differences that really are make or break for whether or not you're going to use this as a text editor, because it could do the craziest stuff in the universe, like pull an image in from NASA and style it as a testimonial in a couple of seconds. But if it can't select and edit text really easily, then you're not going to use it. And so I hope that's a really useful example of how to do some of these different DOM content operations. Again, that's range and selection APIs to be able to do stuff like that. So if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. We're all confused together, that's for sure.